Hey fellow tankers, it's Mobius Y here with another video in the Road to the T110E4 series. Here with episode 5, we're covering the Tier 9 tank destroyer, the T30. This tank destroyer was quite the breath of fresh air after the T28 Prototype for myself, and a lot of you might feel the same way. Your very first game in the T30, you should simply go, I can actually move places now. I personally enjoyed the T30 quite a lot. I had a really enjoyable time with it, and simply put, it was actually quite difficult to have a bad game in the T30 unless I myself did something really stupid, put myself in a bad position, or simply did not position myself properly to back up a fellow teammate who could block shots for me, so on and so forth. The T30 is a very capable Tier 9 tank destroyer. I'd say I actually enjoyed it even more than the Object 704 when I was going up the 268 line, and that was about a year ago, around the same time that I did the T30. And the 704 was a lot of fun, and it's a really good tank, but I thoroughly enjoyed the T30 just as much, if not more, than the Object 704 personally. So the T30, the main thing to note about it is, in a way, it doesn't really have any armor to speak of to protect itself, so you always want to make sure you're paired up with a more heavily armored heavy tank or tank destroyer on your team. And at Tier 9 there's quite a few of those that you can pair up with very easily, such as an STI or an E75, VK45 Bravo, even an M103, and you simply just work the same corner or laneway as your heavy tank is. Let your heavy tank take the shots for you until they get down to one shot themselves. But after any enemies around said corner take a shot at your friendly heavy tank, and most of them are reloading or they've turned their turrets away to aim at somebody else, that's when you jump on the opportunity to peek out, take your shot, smash somebody for 750 damage, and then retreat back behind cover before somebody can retaliate on you. Now, the T30 is mounted on the same kind of chassis as the T29 Tier 7 and T34 Tier 8 Premium Heavy Tank, also in the US tech tree. So if you've played any of those, either of those tanks, the T30 should feel quite familiar. Same chassis, same turret, same kind of structure altogether. The only real difference between the T30 and those other tanks is it gets a really massive 155mm gun when fully upgraded. It does get 120mm while you're grinding it out for the most part, but the final 155 really makes this tank shine, making it a king of peekaboo tactics. Somebody else tries to take a shot at you for 500 or less damage, which is very common with anything that isn't a tank destroyer at Tier 9, and you can simply respond in kind with way more alpha damage. So you can easily, if you're trading shot for shot by retreating behind cover on your reloads and only taking a hit when you yourself are hitting somebody else, you can easily kill pretty much any other tank at Tier 9 before they can kill you, simply because you are sporting so much more alpha damage. There are some exceptions, of course, such as a Waffle Panzer IV or an Object 704, or a couple Tier 9 tank destroyers that mount a really big gun, like a T95 as well, since they're doing the same alpha damage as you. But enough about that. So we're going to take a look at the in-depth stats on the T30 right now. We're going to start with the packages. So opening up the packages here, the T30 completely stock sports the same 105mm gun that you see on the T28 Prototype in the previous tier. However, you shouldn't have to use this, as this bottom package should be 100% free, upgrading you to the 120mm AT gun T53 that you get on the fully upgraded T28 Prototype. So this bottom package should be 100% free, as the only thing it's upgrading is a gun that you already have researched. The top package gives you better tracks so that you have a little bit better of a traverse speed with your hull in the T30 Tier 9 tank destroyer, and you're still using the 120mm AT gun. So these two packages should be either free or very cheap for you when you're starting out your grind of the T30. Now this final package with the 105mm gun, this will be a grind, as just the gun itself is over 60,000 XP. So this final package will range anywhere between 60 to 80,000 XP if you have not previously gone down the other tank destroyer line in the US tech tree. If you have gone down the E3 line and fully upgraded the T95, this package will be significantly cheaper as you have already researched this 155mm gun, putting the total price of this final package to less than 20,000 XP. But if you have not previously gone down the E3 line and have not fully upgraded the T95, this package for you, as it was for me, will be a good 70 to 80,000 XP. It will be a long grind, but this final gun, it really makes the T30 shine. It makes it a force to be reckoned with, and it gives it a presence on the battlefield. So looking at the stats of this final package, you get a pretty nice engine with 860 horsepower, a massive improvement over the T28 Prototype. Not only is the T30 quite a bit lighter than the T28 Prototype, but it gets a much bigger engine, and you notice the difference immediately, especially when you are mounting this for the first time. You can actually scoot around the battlefield much more efficiently than the T28 Prototype, allowing you to get into positions where your massive gun is really needed. As stated, the final gun, 155mm AT-T7. It's a pretty solid Tier 9 tank destroyer gun. You've got a rate of fire of 2.86. That is the one big weakness of this gun. You're looking at a really long reload time. I was able to cut it down to about 16 seconds total. But if you're simply mounting a gun rammer and your crew is trained in Brothers in Arms, you're looking at a 17 or longer second reload. Now, the penetration on the 155mm gun, 276 with the base AP rounds. That's an improvement over the 120mm, which only has 248. And the APCR rounds have an insane 320mm of penetration. Those APCR rounds come in real handy for when you've got a tough nut to crack and you just need to hit them for 750 average alpha damage. This amount of penetration will allow you to penetrate the lower plates of a T110E4 when it is facing you. Not 100% reliably, but fairly often. So when you really need to get some damage in, you can load up some APCR and just punch right through those hard targets and get some serious damage into them. As I said, the average alpha damage on both of those types of rounds is 750. The high explosive rounds are a much bigger improvement over the last several tiers. I used more high explosive rounds on this tank as they have 90mm of penetration with 950 alpha damage. Really good for the very softly armored targets. At tier 9, you've got the Waffle Panzer off 4. And at tier 10, you've got the Waffle itself. So it's really nice for when you can pre-plan loading up an HE shell, coming around a corner and hitting one of those tanks for anywhere between 900 to even over 1,000 damage with an HE shell. Now, the other weaknesses of this gun, the handling is not very good. The aim time is 2.9, a significant drawback compared to the 120mm, which has, I believe, 2.29 average aim time. And the accuracy is 0.38. So this tank's really not that good at the long-range engagements. So repeated use at long-range sniping with the T30, just because, oh, it's a tank destroyer, it's supposed to be a support sniper, you're going to see a lot less success than if you actually support the front line, either being just behind your frontline heavy tanks and mediums, or directly next to a heavy tank that is soaking shots for you and whatnot. You're going to have a lot less success if you are hanging way in the back, trying to shoot at targets 300, 400, 500 meters away, because the aim time will really let you down, and the accuracy will also really let you down, as they're not that great. Now, the traverse speed with the fully upgraded tracks, you've got 22 degrees per second traverse speed, still not that good. And the traverse speed on the turret as well is 18 degrees per second, still quite slow, which is basically a staple of this entire line. And you're only looking at 380 meters of view range. So if you're not mounting something like coated optics, or you don't have Brothers in Arms situational awareness and recon trained on your crew, you can expect to be outspotted fairly often with the T30, especially on large open maps when you're trying to reposition. That's entirely a possibility. Now, the turret armor on the front is rated at 279. We'll go more in depth into that, but it's strictly only on one spot on the turret. It is not the entire turret itself, allowing Tier 9 and Tier 10 tank destroyers to still very easily penetrate the front of the turret. But we'll get more into that as we go into the armor profile on the T30. So we're going to take a look at the consumables and equipment that I mounted on the T30 to make this tank really shine for me. Looking at the consumables, I mounted 25 armor-piercing rounds. These did the job 90% of the time. You can mount more because the T30 carries a pretty hefty ammo capacity for the amount of potential damage that it can do, for sure. The APCR rounds, they are quite expensive, 4,800 silver per round, but they have really good penetration at 320 with the same 750 alpha damage, and they're just super handy to have when you're facing heavily armored tier 10 targets. Especially like a mouse or something silly like that. So I brought 6 of those along just in case I really needed to use them. But as I said, standard AP did the job 90% of the time. For high explosive, I definitely mounted more. As I said, I mounted 3. They're cheaper than the standard AP rounds, and they have really good penetration for an HE round with really good alpha damage. So they're great to load up and just smash somebody who is really, really poorly armored. A lot of tier 7 tanks that have paper armor, a lot of them tank destroyers, you can very easily one-shot them with an HE round from this gun. The consumables I used on the T30, I had a large repair kit, large first aid kit, and a case of cola. Now, these can be changed up however you like. You can simply mount a small repair and small first aid. The large repair kit was to help improve the repairing of the tracks. If I was peeking around a corner and somebody smacked me right in the tracks, I wanted them to repair as quickly as possible in case there were 2 or 3 other guns also looking at me, looking to do some damage at me. The T30 can get killed very easily. It doesn't have a hell of a lot of hit points, and it has pretty weak armor to speak of, so it is pretty easy to suffer damage, and other tier 9 and especially tier 10 tank destroyers will very easily kill you in 2 shots. So I wanted the tracks repairing as fast as possible. The large first aid kit was mostly just for the added protection to my crew. It's pretty easy to knock out crew members on this tank, as it is very easy to damage, as I said. So the crew is fairly unprotected since this tank can be damaged easily with penetrating shots. And the case of cola, this is entirely up to you guys what you mount here. You can mount octane if you want. You could definitely use an automatic fire extinguisher since this tank catches fire very easily if you're shot in the backside of the hull. But I went with a case of cola for a couple reasons. One, I really wanted to cut down on the reload speed as much as possible on this tank, and secondly, the gun handling is bad on this tank, so I wanted to try and help improve that as much as possible. The case of cola definitely assisted in that respect, but the big difference was the case of cola shaves off a good half a second on the reload speed with the 155mm gun. But as I said, you could change the case of cola to anything else that you desire, octane, even a automatic fire extinguisher. I definitely recommend an automatic fire extinguisher if your crew is not trained in preventative maintenance and firefighting. I myself did not have those crew skills on my crew, so whenever I caught fire, I suffered for it greatly. But it was always my fault when that happened because somebody was just in the perfect position to shoot me in the back of the hull, and every time that happened, I caught fire. So I did my best to minimize that as much as possible. Let's take a look at the equipment now that I use on this tank. So, opening the equipment, I used a large caliber tank gun rammer. I also used improved ventilation class 3 and an enhanced gun laying drive. So these kind of worked in conjunction together. The vents and the gun laying drive is the best combination to improve the gun handling with the 155mm cannon, as this tank cannot mount vertical stabilizer, which is a big weakness for this tank. It's very unfortunate, but if it could mount vertical stabilizer, I'd almost say go with a gun laying drive and a vertical stabilizer, but it can't. So vents and a gun laying drive definitely helped with the overall gun handling of this tank. The gun laying drive is kind of a must on this tank because the aim time, as I said, is quite bad at 2.9. The gun rammer is self-explanatory, but combined with the vents, it helps reduce the reload speed a very significant portion. So those two combined with the case of cola really cuts down on the reload speed of the 105mm gun that you get excuse me, on the fully upgraded T30. The main reason why I went with that setup is, like I said, there isn't really much else you can mount on this tank. You could mount a camouflage net and binocular telescope, but that tends to encourage a campy, sniping kind of play style, which, as I said, will not garner much success with this tank. You could definitely mount coated optics if you wanted to swap out either the gun laying drive or the vents. You could definitely swap out coated optics, as this tank does not have a very good view range, and it will get outspotted a lot. So if that drives you nuts, coated optics, you can definitely do that for sure. But as I said, there's really nothing else worth mounting on the T30. It can't mount vertical stabilizers, unfortunately. So I stuck with the choice that I made with the rammer, the vents, and the gun laying drive. So that's a look at the T30's consumables and equipment that I tried, as well as the package. Let's take a look at tanks.gg and take a look at the armor profile. Okay, so here we are on tanks.gg looking at the armor profile on the T30. So the thickest pieces of plating you'll see, they're 279 millimeters thick in both plain armor plating as well as spaced armor. But the 279 millimeters of plain armor plating, it's in a very, very specific spot, somewhere on the turret. I can't quite find it right now, but it's not important. The important thing to note here is that the T30 is not very well protected whatsoever. As I said, the thickest part on the turret is 279 millimeters, and that's right in the gun mantlet, and it's all spaced armor there. There are some areas where you'll get crazy values over 500 millimeters, but for the most part, the gun mantlet is the most protective piece of armor on this entire tank. 279 millimeters, it's all spaced armor, so it will render heat rounds pretty much useless, especially high penetration heat rounds from tier 10 tank destroyers. But high tier tank destroyers that shoot APCR, they can punch right through your gun mantlet in select spots and still damage you heavily. Apart from that, you've got parts of the gun mantlet where it's at 203 millimeters of spaced armor, but there's more armor behind it, another 203 millimeters, so you're looking at crazy values on the edges of the gun mantlet. The turret face itself, not very thick. Tier 9, Tier 10 tank destroyers could punch through this quite easily as well. 280 millimeters. As you start to get to the edges of the turret frontally, you're looking at only 300 millimeters and so on and so forth. The most common weak point on the turret of the T30 is this hatch at the very top here. There's parts of it that are only 50 millimeters, 60 millimeters thick. So it's very easy for the T30 to get damaged. But as I said, your gun mantlet is the most protective part of this tank. So hull down, hull down, hull down. And did I mention hull down? Hull down's your best friend with this tank. Easily. Play peekaboo. Use your turret armor to try and protect you as best as you can, and wiggle the turret a little bit when you're backing up. Just move it back and forth like so. You'll cause some pretty crazy bounces, which will just annoy the crap out of other people. As I said, the T30 in the hull, not very protected. The front plate, you're only looking at about 150 effective. You've got the machine gun port on the side here, which only goes up to about 95 in some areas, but it's as low as 70 in other areas. Of course, the lower plate's nice and weak, 120 millimeters roughly. The sides of the T30, the turret's pretty weak. Anything that isn't like a tier 7, a stock tier 7, will be able to penetrate the side of your turret when you're not looking at them very easily. The side of the hull itself, 76 millimeters. The tracks add 20 millimeters of spaced armor, but it's only 96 millimeters, so it's very weak there. And the very back, the turret is quite a weak point, only about 105 millimeters. Anything could penetrate you there. The very back of the hull, 51 or 80 millimeters. And that's where all your engine is. So it's very easy for something to penetrate you in the back and set you on fire. So, as I said, you want to use this tank hull down, play peekaboo tactics with it, never peek out unless you are ready to fire, pretty much, or just about to. Give yourself about 2 or 3 seconds on your reload before you peek out, because you want to start aiming in before your shot has fully reloaded, so that you can get the aim spread tighter right when you're ready to shoot. So let's look at some of the soft stats as well as the gun constraints. The T30, as I said, it's really good at hull down, not just because of its turret mantlet, which is quite protective, but also the gun has 10 degrees of gun depression, making this thing a very effective ridge fighter, peeking over hills, smacking people in the sides or in the weak spots for 750 alpha damage. So definitely using ridges is a really good way to utilize the T30. And if you find yourself in an urban environment and you can't really go hull down very much, definitely pair up with a top tier heavy tank on your team and just support them. Wait for them to block shots for you and take their shot, and then you can peek out, take your shot, and smack somebody for 750 alpha damage. The T30 does not sport very good DPM, over 2200, which is significantly less than something like a Waffle 4 sporting the smaller gun, But it still, as I said, it still sports pretty good alpha damage at 750, 276 millimeters of penetration, so on and so forth. So the soft stats, we're going to compare the soft stats of the T30 with another tier 9 tank destroyer. Let's go with the, well, this is tough. Can't really give a good example. So we'll just choose the Jagd Tiger, which is a really popular tier 9 tank destroyer. The dispersion values when moving or traversing the tank, only a little bit worse than the Jagd Tiger, but when the turret is traversing, it's significantly worse than the Jagd Tiger. The Jagd Tiger does not lose very much of its accuracy when it is moving its gun. But the T30, this is where you'll get hit most of the time with your accuracy. When you're trying to traverse the turret to line up a shot, you'll lose a lot of your accuracy there. The Jagdtiger maintains better accuracy after firing as well. And the terrain resistances, the Jagdtiger all around has better terrain resistances altogether, quite a bit better than the T30 as well. So even though the Jagdtiger is a bit slower than the T30 in terms of top speed, the Jagdtiger will maintain its top speed better on all types of terrain. But the T30 is still capable of booting around the map. It's got 810 horsepower, I believe it was, as well as you're looking at a 35 kilometer an hour top speed. Significant improvements over the T28 Prototype, for sure. Excuse me. So, as I said, looking at the armor profile, it's pretty easy to damage the T30, so you'll want to pair up with one or two friendly heavy tanks, work the same corner or ridge line as them, let them take the shots for you for the majority of the fight going on. Use your gun depression to your advantage for sure. 10 degrees of gun depression is nothing to scoff at. This is a much harder target to hit and damage at this kind of angle. You'd be looking essentially at the gun barrel and above on the turret. The hatch is completely covered because you're using your 10 degrees of gun depression, and your opponents would not be able to see your hull whatsoever. And when peeking around city corners, it's a lot harder to protect yourself in a T30, but essentially just peek out at an angle, wait for your opponents to take their shots at the friendly heavies that you've paired up with, and then you can peek out, smash them for 750 alpha damage, hit them right in their weak point. You'll damage them every time, and then once again let your heavies do their job of soaking shots for you. When your heavy tanks get more damage, then you can start to throw your weight around, as you do have 1650 HP yourself, almost as much as most tier 9 heavy tanks. So you can start to throw your weight around. Once your heavy tanks start to take significant amounts of damage, you could soak the odd shot for them as well and just work together as a team. So that's a look at the armor profile and the soft stats. Let's take a detailed look at the crew and module locations on the T30. So on the front of the T30, you can see here it's very easy for your driver to get knocked out, kind of a staple for this whole line. On the left side of the hull there, the right side of the hull behind the machine gun port is where your radio man sits. And you can see with the green area in the lower parts of the hull, very easy for anything to damage the lower parts of your hull when you're peeking out. Even a tier 7 can very easily penetrate the front hull of the T30. The left side of the T30, again, you see the weaknesses on the sides of the hull there. You're only looking at 76 millimeters above the tracks and behind the tracks. The left side of the turret, which is very easily damaged, it's only about 120 millimeters thick. Your loader can easily get damaged in the center of the turret. The very back of the turret is where the ammo rack sits. So shots to kind of the middle or the back areas of the T30 turret, if you really want to kill their DPM or just absolutely cripple the tank, knock out their loader or their ammo rack in the turret areas. Now, in the very back of the T30, the very back of the turret is all one big weak point, and there is ammo rack back there that can be damaged, but it's the lower parts of the turret that house most of the ammo rack on the T30. The entire back of the hull of the T30 is all fuel tanks and engine deck, so it's very easy to catch fire if you're taking shots in the back of the T30. Be sure to keep that protected as best as possible. Don't let enemies flank you, shoot you in the back of the T30, and set you on fire, especially if, like me, you don't run a fire extinguisher. So the right side of the T30, again, in the very back of the hull behind the tracks, you've got your engine deck, easy to catch fire. The right side of the turret, you've got another loader on the right side of the turret. He can get killed. The front of the turret on the right, that's where your gunner sits. He does get knocked out fairly frequently when people know that your turret can be shot with a high penetration round or high penetration gun. And the commander actually sits in that hatch at the back of the turret, so he can get knocked out if people continuously shoot you in that hatch. You've got more ammo rack in the underside of the turret behind the loader. And again, the entire right side of the hull is all one big weak point, more or less. So all in all, the T30, it's easy to suffer damage, but it's also quite easy to deal damage with this tank. I had a much better time with this tank over the T28 Prototype, as it was fairly mobile, had a really punishing cannon, and as I said, I found it difficult to have a bad game in this tank. While my overall stats in the T28 Prototype in a way, they are better. I had a better kill-death ratio and damage caused received ratio in the T28 Prototype. My kill-death was 3.03 and my damage caused received was 2.61 with the T28 Prototype. However, my average damage caused per battle with the T28 Prototype was quite low at 1,860 average. With the T30, it's a totally different story. I only had a 2.77 kill-death ratio and 2.36 damage caused received. However, my average damage caused per battle was 2.55 thousand. So 2,550 average damage caused per battle. That's roughly 4 penetrations with this Top Gun. 3 to 4 penetrations and you're golden with the T30. You've done your damage that game more or less. So like I said, if I had a mediocre game or a really bad game, it was 100% my own fault, as I would have put myself in a bad position or allowed myself to get in a bad position, not pairing up with a fellow heavy tank or not using a ridgeline to my advantage. So that's enough of that. Let's just jump into some gameplay now. I have 2 really good games to show you. 2 of my better games in the T30. I only recorded a couple, and these 2 were the ones that really stood out. So this first game on Ensk War is Team Destruction, and I am not platooned. I am 100% by myself in this game. So loading in, immediately opening the team composition. It's definitely a tier 10 game, but there's only about 4 on each team. The rest are pretty much 9s and a few 8s on both teams as well, including several tier 7 scout tanks. So, Ensk War is significantly different from normal Ensk in that you have all the building poop or rubble piles lining around the map. So, while it is more difficult for maneuverable tanks like scouts and medium tanks to get around the map and get into good positions, or even get a good flank going on, a tank like the T30, which excels at peek-a-boom tactics and can really use some hard cover to protect its hull, the T30 is just in a much better situation on a map like Ensk War as opposed to normal Ensk, as you can not only work a corner, but also work a corner with a piece of rubble to help protect your hull. So after trying to get out of the spawn, bumping into an M103, bumping into an RU-251 Spy Panzer, just generally getting in people's way, I'm looking at the map and just about the entire team is stopping to shoot at the 1 scout and medium tank that have been spotted. Everybody's rushing to try to get some damage in. So I was trying to bring people's attention to the other parts of the map, which were significantly more important than the field, especially on Ensk War. So I knew where I wanted to go. I like holding the 1 line on Ensk regular as well as Ensk War. I don't have as big of a shooting lane down the 1 line with all the rubble in the way or building poop in the way as I would on the normal Ensk map, but I know that I can definitely be a presence over there and just stop the enemy team from sending a big push around that entire flank. So the friendly Jagdtiger just got hit by the M103, so I wanted to get into position to back up the Jagdtiger. Didn't know if the M103 had any backup with him. If the Jagdtiger was very much alone and the M103 had more forces with them, they could have very well considered pushing up, in which case I could easily back up the Jagdtiger and dish out some serious damage before the enemy team could gain control of this entire flank of the map. Excuse me. Throat's getting a little dry. So this spot right here, really good for the T30. You can use the rubble pile to go nice and hull down, and you can just barely peek over this piece of building poop and get some shots on the enemy teams using your 10 degrees of gun depression. However, I only got the 1 shot off on the M103. That's when I noticed that enemies came around on the left side of me. This VK-45 Alpha, his turret was turned to me, so I tried to shoot him in the back of the turret, hoping to ammo rack him, but I didn't ammo rack him. But it didn't really matter. I still hit him for over 800 damage, so I'm just trying to reposition my tank now. I'm in a really awkward spot, to be totally honest, but I'm able to peek over this piece of rubble, get my gun down using that 10 degrees of gun depression, and if the VK-45 Alpha stuck around, he would have been dead by this point, as I could have easily planted a shot into him. But he was smart. He took off running, so my attention is turning back to down the 1 line here. Trying to position myself so that my hull isn't peeking out further than this rubble pile, as well as using my turret to peek over the rubble pile, allowing me to get nice shots over this. 1 more shot in the M103 for 774 damage, putting him down to a 1 shot. The VK-45 Alpha gets really brave, shoots me in the side, but he only damages my tracks. An unfortunate hit for him. So at this point, I'm pretty much surrounded. This is when you're going to have a bad time in the T30 if you are in a position where the enemies are basically allowed to flank around where the line that you're holding, your shooting lane. If they're able to flank around on your side and get easy shots on your side, then you know you're kind of in a bit of trouble there. So seeing the scout tank was coming through, I repositioned to line up on him. He completely forgot I was there, I guess. Came out too far, and I was able to aim in just enough to plant a nice shot on him and take him out of the game. An AMX-50B rolled back past the corner, completely ignored me. This is when an STI came up right in my face, decided to try and brawl it out with me, and I simply planted a shot into his lower plate for 795 damage, and the Yog Tiger also gets one into his side, dropping him down to a one-shot. STI penetrates me for one more shot. I've got about 4 seconds to kill this guy, so I decided I'm just going to sit still, aim for his lower plate, just plant a quick shot into him to take him out before he can damage me again. 422 damage to take out that STI. Thankfully, the Yog Tiger was there to help me, otherwise I could have very easily been killed by that STI. Now, this E100 had his turret turned towards the scout tank. I was hoping to get a shot off in his turret side, but it wasn't going to happen. He almost rolls up around the corner here, planting a finishing shot into me, but he decided not to take it. I'm not sure why. I just accepted it. I'm still alive. I can do more damage this game. So he gets tracked. I pulled forward to try to plant a shot in his lower plate, but my shot came out way too late, only tracking him. But I racked up quite a bit of tracking damage with other people landing their shots, and the Death Star finishing him off once and for all. So a fairly quick game there, not even 5 minutes, just working that one corner as best as I could. 4,510 damage dealt, getting about almost 10,000 XP that game with multipliers and ops. Easily getting top damage in the game by a long shot. So pretty good game overall on a city map. That corner is a very interesting spot for a T30 to use. If you have enough teammates protecting your flank by the fountain courtyard on Ensk, then it's very easy to use even the smallest rubble pile to go hull down, protect your hull from easy damage, and use your 10 degrees of gun depression surprisingly well, dish out some damage down that one line on Ensk. So the second battle I have here is on a more open map. We're looking at Airfield, and it's a standard battle. This game I am platooned. Excuse me. This game I am platooned this time. And taking a look at the team composition, we are very top tiered. There's only 4 tier 9s per team, and pretty much the rest are tier 8s, save for a couple tier 7s. So we're looking forward to just having way too much fun in this game. Platooned with Mistaken ID in her M46 Patton. So being top tier, the T30 plays very much akin to what you would expect from a heavy tank. You can get in people's faces, you can brawl it out with them, and you can simply punish them for their incompetence with LOL Alpha. Is basically how it goes. The T30, with the final 155mm gun, when you have matchmaking this good, it's very easy to throw your weight around, play much more defensively, when utilizing hull down tactics to protect your HP, and just really punish lower tier tanks, taking off half or more of their HP in one shot, simply for trying to go toe-to-toe with you. So it looks like the team is spreading out pretty nicely. None of our heavy tanks are coming to the north, unfortunately, but with Mistaken ID and myself there right up in the middle, brawling it out where most of the action tends to happen, we fully expected that we'd be able to have a pretty good experience, as we had a decent amount of backup coming with us. We had a Super Pershing coming with us. There was a J Panther 2 on the ridge behind us, who might not have the greatest shots, but he'd be able to back us up if we had to retreat somewhat. We did have 2 heavy tanks that decided to come with us eventually, so that was a relief there. Not sure if any of them were the M103 or the E75 though. So keeping an eye on the map, the enemy team doesn't look like they've spread out too much from their home spawn point, which is what I was hoping for. As I said, the T30 is in a much better position when you are brawling up close instead of going for long-range sniper shots. Took a quick shot at the Tiger 2, wanted to try and hit him before he got behind cover, but the shot went way wide and hit the piece of rock that he was diving for cover behind. So that tends to happen, but I wanted to take the shot before he completely got away, and I had no chance of damaging him through a big piece of rock. essentially. So looking over to the right, I know my friendlies over there could handle it. There's just a Chi-Ri over there, so I wasn't too worried about that. Peeking out, trying to line up a shot on this stock Conqueror, but the detected icon was going off, so I knew something was looking at me. I didn't want to chance it being the ISU, who may or may not have a shot on me. But peeking out once more, staying unspotted, getting a nice shot on the M103, low rolling for 722, but he's on life support, so anybody else that gets a penetrating shot on that M103 will take him out of the game. So opening the map, still seeing some of our heavy tanks way back at our base. Trying to get them into the action here, pinging the map. Don't have a very good shot on the Conqueror, but he pulls forward far enough for me to take it anyways. Threading the needle there. Very surprised that shot hit, but dealing about 630 damage to take him out of the game. So I've only got 2 penetrating hits, and I'm already looking at 13 to 1400 damage. Like I said, it's very easy to rack up damage with this final gun of the T30. This gun absolutely makes the tank. You can brawl a little bit with it, playing some peek-a-boom tactics. You can punish enemy players who simply overexpose themselves. It makes the tank, simply put. Similar to the final 155 makes the T95 as well, the other US Tier 9 tank destroyer. So just jockeying for positions here, trying to figure out who I can shoot. But people were getting unspotted. The Tortoise pulled far enough ahead that mistaken ID was able to spot him. But I didn't want to mess with the Tortoise just now. So peeking out, firing blind at where a T28 was just recently spotted. Not sure if I hit him, but that doesn't matter. Spotting the enemy T30 moving behind the hangars. So I made a mental note of the enemy T30's position, as he's very likely fully upgraded as well. Putting a really long shot on an overexposed ISU 152, ammo racking him for his final 788 hit points, taking out a very dangerous Tier 8 tank destroyer. A fully upgraded ISU 152 is a threat in any game. Don't kid yourself, that thing gets a very nasty final gun. So peeking out on the Tortoise once again, trying to fire a shot into him. It either flat out missed him or it hit the rock that he was partially covered from. So unfortunately missing that shot there. But the 3 medium tanks, including Mistaken ID, that were just manhandling him, I figured that they had the situation under control. So I pulled forward, using my gun depression to aim down on this T69, plant a shot on him for over 760 HP, dropping him down to half health in one shot. So it looked like that the T69 was reloading, so I knew I could just bully him into submission. I figured he might finish his reload before I finished mine, but I took the 2 hits like a champ and just finished him off for under 400 damage to take him out of the game. Excuse me. The friendly Super Pershing that was assisting me just a moment ago, he gets taken out by this T28 Prototype that is across the map. So the T28 Prototype, very exposed. I went for a side shot, but at the last second he moved, so I simply planted one through his front plate. I know it's only about 220, 230 effective, so of course the shot goes right through, doing about 680 damage. Dropping him down to a one-shot, so looks like I'm able to aim in here. Can I get the second shot on the T28 Prototype? Yes, I can. Finishing him off for 71 damage, right through his side armor. So we're already up 12-6 this game. There's only 3 enemy tanks left, and I know one of them is that T30. He is concern number 1. He's probably got the biggest gun left out of their whole team by a long shot, especially considering the last 2 tanks are a Freedom and a T28. So I'm trying to climb up this little cliff here. This is a neat little trick you can do on Airfield. If you ever find yourself in the position I was, where I took on the T69, if you have enough horsepower, you actually can climb up that cliff. It's a much bigger shortcut than driving around towards where the red base is right now and going around the rocks that way. Unfortunately, my platoon mate, Mistaken ID, gets taken out by the Freedom that's been sitting on top of the cliff this whole time. So that drops us down to 12-7, but we still vastly outnumber them, over 2-1, almost 3-1. And I really want to get this T30 taken out. He's the biggest threat to my team. So I peek out before he can turn his turret and get a well-placed shot on me. I simply plant one in his overexposed side armor, dropping him down to a little bit less than half health. So simply waiting for some teammates to come in and back me up. Friendly heavy, it looks like a 110, pulls around behind these TDs. And we've got a T44 on the left side moving into support as well. The 110 takes out the enemy T28, knocking him out. T44 pulls forward to deal with the T30, but the T30 gets his reload off more quickly. allowing me in the 110 to plant the finishing shots on that T30, taking him out of the game and finally securing us the win there. Bit of a longer game, but the results were an improvement even over Ensk. 5,654 damage dealt, pretty easy high caliber medal, and of course an ace tanker badge. So top damage throughout that entire game. Mistaken ID also doing quite well, 3,538 damage dealt with her M46 Patton. So the two of us topping the board in overall damage dealt on both teams by a long shot. Obviously, that was kind of expected since we were very top tiered. There were only a few tier 9s on each team, and the rest were tier 8s and tier 7s. So, what can you expect? Pretty easy to do damage in a situation like that when you have a gun such as this on the T30. So guys, that was an in-depth look at the T30 as well as some pretty dang good gameplay. Those were, I believe, two of my best games that I had in the T30. As I said, I had a much better time with the T30 over the T28 Prototype. It's mobile, it's very hard hitting, and it is just an absolute beast when it comes to playing peekaboo tactics, especially in urban environments. My favorite map with this tank was easily Ruinberg War. That was a map where I never had a bad game on Ruinberg War with the T30. So that should about sum it up for this episode of the Road to the E4. Getting a little bit lengthy here at almost another 40-minute video, so I do apologize for the time spent on this video. But in the meantime, this has been Mobius Y. I really do hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope to see you on the battlefield or in my next video. And we'll be finishing up here with the review on the T110E4 to close off this series within a few days here. So as always, thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Happy tanking!